The top stories live from the Flashpoint News Network. ESL announces new hyperbolic time chamber. Events can now span up to 40 hours per day. And in financial news, there are fears for renowned color commentator Henry G as Bitcoin prices plummet. We've lost millions in this game, announces Cloud9's Jacques Etienne after their $6 million investment. And in other news, Dignitas took time out of their busy schedules to visit a local orphanage. It was just so heartbreaking. Looking into their sad little eyes, there was no hope for them, said Billy, age 9. As pressure mounts from the Brazilian community, the case of banned player VSM is revisited. Valve issued the following statement: "We will not be unbanning iBuyPower." Warning: zombie outbreak as former Dignitas, NIP and Fnatic player Exist rises from the dead to terrorize the lands with his loose style of in-game leading. That's all from us at the Flashpoint News Network. We'll see you next time.
We're here at Get to the Point, our Flashpoint pre-show. There's a train going by for some reason. We're shoveling coal into it. Who knows what's going on? Is this our hype train that's charging through the British landscape here? What do you think, Maui and Christine?
It's gotta be. I mean, can't be more hype than a Swedish derby. Cannot think of any matchup at Flashpoint 2 that could be better than what we've got today.
Really? Not even a Danish derby? We don't have enough Danes.
Yeah.
We don't. Well, we kind of do.
We have a Dane deficiency.
Swedish Derby is like the original, though. It's the OG like rivalry that we saw way back in the day with NIP and Fnatic, and we kind of get to see it here today as well.
Yeah, it's almost El Clasico, which I think was Fnatic, NIP, and this is just old NIP players on a new roster. Still Fnatic, though. So.
Yeah, and what's interesting about Fnatic, too, is that they haven't already qualified for the playoffs, right? And we are going to see them potentially doing so today. The stakes today, everybody, are two teams are going to punch their ticket into the playoffs. Now, whether they're going to be at the first or second seed in their group, we will not know until later this week. Now, the teams that lose, they finish in third place, but they will not go home just yet. Starting on Sunday, they will have a chance in our last chance qualifiers to make that best of 3 8-team double elimination bracket that you see below. Now, our last chance qualifiers, all 3 third-place teams, and Envy, since they won the tiebreakers based on map score and round differential from our 4th-place team, will be the final seed in there. Our last chance qualifiers are just 2 best of 3s. So the 7th place team will play the 10th place team. The 8th place team will play the 9th place team. The winner of each of those matches, well, they're heading into the playoffs as our 7th and 8th seeds, respectively. So very exciting times here, but we are going to have to go through a recap of our last week of action, get you all caught up to speed, and we'll get your thoughts on how things are shaking out as well. First up is going to be the group that we are starting with in our first match of the day. It will be our MIDSOMMAR group, as named for Scandinavians killing other Scandinavians, but also a few non-Scandinavians also getting killed. They're already dead, in fact. Contact has died in this tournament. Dignitas Vi is advancing, so it's only Nord-on-Nord violence remaining. What have been your thoughts in this group so far? Obviously, Mad Lions pulling out the 2nd win over Fnatic in a week. 1 in IEM, 1 here. Maybe 1 coming up on Sunday as well.
Yeah,
Saturday, excuse me.
I'd say that there's a couple surprises in this group already. I think most people looking at the name value of the teams would have thought Fnatic would have been the easy favorites to get through all of this. But if you've been following CS closely, you know that this Mad Lions team, they're on the rise, and they've actually stuck it to Fnatic with some excellent game plans, as well as some great individual performances from players like Refresh and Acor.
Yeah, and I have to point out, man, this series, you see JW flailing his arms there in disbelief, because if we think back to this series right here on the 3rd map, Fnatic were up 14-8. They're in a 5 versus 3 scenario. They have every option available to them to close out the series, and they end up losing this overpass in OT versus Lions. So a few good things for Lions, you know, coming into Flashpoint 2 once again with a brand new in-game leader, probably their biggest star player out of the mix, out of the picture, but they still are postured here to get 1st place out of their group, which is impressive in and of itself. And with Fnatic, still a lot of question marks rising up. They tend to be a team that kind of peak performances throughout towards the end of the tournament, and in the beginning there's a lot of shenanigans, a lot of maybe throwing
we did see
rounds,
some shenanigans.
some throwing
we did
rounds
see some.
coming out of Fnatic, but they should be getting better and better as the tournament goes on.
Yeah, worth noting as well that they will be boot camping if they make the playoffs, so we anticipate their form to improve the deeper they get into that tournament. It's their chance to punch their ticket into those playoffs today. But let's keep moving along as we review our first week of competition here and head into our next group. The Demolition Men. Envy still alive. All teams in this group still alive. They're the only ones with 4 teams still in contention here at Flashpoint 2. Envy will be playing on Sunday with a long prep period, so we expect to see some better games out of them moving forward. Big, however, basically rolling their way straight into the winner's match as we might have expected. And Forza and MIBR will be playing in our second match today. Now, it must be said, Forza, I think, had the easier path to these playoffs because we did see MIBR play Big first in that first round. But both have lost to Big so far. How do you think Forza and MIBR will shape up today?
I think that this is a really good matchup because the map pool for both of these teams is pretty competitive. Forza and MIBR, they both like that Nuke and Vertigo, and that is probably where they will be battling today. Forza, they've been a team for quite a long time now. MIBR, they're newly forming, but MIBR, it feels like they're rising very quickly, whereas Forza, they might have stagnated in the last few months.
And as for Big Christine, is anybody going to beat them in this group? Should we just consider them the kings of the Demolition Men heading out in that first seed?
They've made a pretty big statement for themselves, at least in the first week, right? They certainly look like the strongest team within their group. I still have a lot of question marks for Forza, though. I mean, I said it in the green room. I think Exit Power is probably one of the best oppers in this tournament. It's time for him to step up to the plate, which he has been, at least on the stats side of things. So I got to look at Flit. I think Flit is, he had a monstrous 2019, even rumors of him joining Na'Vi. And I got to say, for this online portion that we've been going through, I think he's one of the players that struggled the most to make those adjustments, to find his right timings, because on land, man, his aggression, his timings, that was the key. That was the X factor for this Force side. So if Flit finds his groove, if he starts hitting his stride, then this Force team, they're going to be the team that kind of swings back to big.
Let's roll it back to that hot take you just kind of casually slid in there at the beginning, which is that Exit Power is one of the top oppers at this event. Now, you call him Sexy Power, Maui, as we know from your strip group. Exactly. Do you agree?
Maui.
Do you agree that Sexy Power is one of the best oppers that we have at Flashpoint 2?
I'm not sure Sexy Power fucks hard enough for me to be one of the top 5
Who
oppers
does
here.
fuck hard enough for Maui Snake?
Okay.
Come on, Maui.
I'm going to have to give it, I think Surson right now has shown to be the most complete opper.
Yeah.
He works incredibly well in the big game plan. So it's nice that they match up together in this group, that they will perhaps face off again, but we've already seen it as a matter of fact. And Surson did come out on top. I think KNG is actually another great opper. I think some of the best oppers are actually all in this Demolition Man group. Nifty as well had a really nice performance to close on Overpass to close that map out earlier in this group.
Yeah, I mean, it was important, I think, for Envy that Nifty steps up. If he is having some of the IGLing pressure taken off of him by having Legia on the squad, then we have to see him really reciprocate by having a stronger individual performance, and he has had that. James also, as you were mentioning earlier when we were chatting, has been a huge force for Virtus Pro so far and has had some very impressive plays.
Yeah, definitely. He's been super clutch for them, and he's a player who has been memed in the past, but I like that he's trying to go for these clutches. I mean, a lot of the times, he's that last player on the bomb site, and he's had some really excellent moments. Against Cloud9 in particular, I don't know how many clutches he won individually. I think 4 off the top of my head that I remember, and one of them where he was able to steal Woxix op and then shut it down at that new box on that B Inferno site. I mean, he's been doing it all, James, just leading and playing at a very high level.
All right, well, we got a little ahead of ourselves because we're not talking about that group yet, just about Super Snipers here in Flashpoint 2. So let's move right along and talk about our final group that we saw in competition last week. And this is going to be our Tower of Babel group. And, of course, that now infamously contains the last place Cloud9, a team that no one expected, even in this difficult group, to end in 12th place at Flashpoint 2, not even taking a map the folly of building the tower towards God, the arrogance has cast them down into the darkest depths.
Man, this group was just so wonky. It was all over the place. Even look at that first opening. OG versus Gen G, a 2-0. Gen G just
Crazy
kinda,
upset.
Yeah,
Crazy
upset. And Cloud9 getting last place. I do gotta say, OG, they look like two completely different teams in that series versus Gen G versus the one versus even Cloud9 later on throughout, right? So Gen G, they had a great train. They showed some innovative, very slow, methodical strategies, which I think caught off a lot of these teams. But by this point, I'm looking at OG and BP to kind of solidify their hold on that first and second place.
Yeah, it makes sense. But Maui, do you think Gen G have a legitimate shot at playoffs? Can they squeak in via the last chance qualifiers versus some of the other potential teams we expect to be there? Teams like Envy, Dignitas, Vi potentially. Are these matchups that you think Gen G is capable of winning with their two stand-ins?
Actually, yes. I think Gen G could beat any of these teams because right now, Gen G have one thing in their back pocket, it's their train. And I think right now at this tournament, they have the best train. And what's great about that is there aren't any teams that they should be facing in the last chance qualifier that ban out train. So I think that's a free map. And if you're going into any BO3 with a free map, I think that gives you a huge advantage. So Gen G, they should actually probably qualify for playoffs if they keep up this level.
Yeah, and we focused on this upset. We focused on the underperformance of Cloud9, but it would do a disservice not to talk about the teams that are on top. OG, they started shaky, it has to be said. But in their second matchup versus Cloud9, Alexi B is dropping 30 frags as an IGL and absolutely dominating. So OG, now they've had a rough couple of weeks now across multiple tournaments. Do you think OG is back on form? Because Alexi said in his interview with us, he really thought as a morale booster that this win was huge for them.
Oh, and it absolutely was. And especially the fact that Alexi B was the player to kind of take over that entire series. And when he's feeling himself, when he's having those good games, his calling is going to reflect just that. And that's kind of what we saw. And as you mentioned, Monty, two very different looking teams. I do think that OG, because of the adjustments that they were able to make in such a short period of time, that bodes well for these guys. The amount of experience that they have on this squad, they're going to be able to make those quick audibles on the fly in the middle of a series. So I think, once again, I do have to agree with Maui on the Gen G aspect. They do look like they're having a shot at contending to take away, possibly to upset a little bit more. But with OG adjusting so fast, it's just going to get tougher and tougher.
And now for Virtus Pro. The team that I think has looked the strongest overall in this group. Many people were pegging them as a potential dark horse in this tournament. And in contrast to what we've seen from OG, Virtus Pro has been rocking tournaments recently. As Thorn has pointed out several times, a couple very solid best-of-3 wins over Na'Vi. Is Virtus Pro still looking like a possible championship team here at Flashpoint?
Yes, I would say definitely. Jame right now is looking like the best opera in the entire tournament, and their style, maybe teams remember how they used to play a year ago, but this is a very different Virtus Pro. That swap out of a Dren, major champion, of course, can't forget that, but with Yakinder, young rising talent in the CIS region, he has looked explosive, to say the least. That guy, Yakinder, he defies the logic of Counter-Strike in a way that not many other people do. Art has a good run for it in the NA scene, and of course, that Brazilian kind of side, that aggressive style, but Yakinder, he just peaks whenever he feels like
I
it
love watching
with
him.
Rifles, and it's just
so disrespectful.
It is insane. And it's something that if you're playing against that, you think, okay, guys, just be ready for Yakinder to peak, but really, he just swings and he kills you.
Yeah, what's been funny too is, we have access to the comms when we're watching the games, and there have been multiple occasions where Yakinder has just swung on people, and they've been like, why did he do that? But he gets 2 kills, and it's like, you can really hear that the other teams are not expecting him to play in such kind of a crazily aggressive style.
Well, they are expecting it, to be fair. They're expecting
I don't know.
They're expecting it, but it's hard, right? The timings, Yakinder's just got it in his blood. He knows exactly when to pounce, and watching him be that deadly in the server versus the best players in the world, it's something else, something special.
All right. Well, that's a great recap that we've gone through of all 3 of our groups and the teams that remain. Remember, only 2 eliminated overall, and we will see a couple more eliminated as we hit Sunday night. But until then, everyone still in contention. But first up, before we head into our first match of the day, we are going to take a look at an interview with Freiburg that Freya did earlier about Dignitas Vi's upcoming shot.
After the break.
Dignitas.
Face off.
Fnatic. Who?
Fnatic.
Okay. Fnatic versus Flashpoint.
Dignitas versus Fnatic. See you in 3.
I've got the lovely Rubberback from Dignitas Vi on the line with me ahead of this next matchup. Thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat with me. First of all, I wanted to ask about your own, in-game leading style. Now we've seen you go over into this role. How have you been developing in that?
It's been a lot to learn. I think, obviously I have an idea in my head what I want to do, like how I want my team to play, but I think that we're evolving. Like when we're playing against teams, we notice they do something nice, we talk about it, and that's a lot of like my calling has come down to like actually talking with the team and discussing with them how they want to play the game as well. Because I can't just tell everyone exactly what to do. I need to make sure that everyone is comfortable as well. So I think that we're evolving a lot. I think we had a really good week of practice now before Flashpoint started, and we've also been keeping on practice like between games here. So I'm feeling that we're evolving all the time, and we're just getting better and better. So the more time we get, the better we will be.
And speaking of that evolution, of course, we see 2 new players coming on in C.R.A.E and Heath. How are you kind of working with them, as some of the more experienced players in yourself and Forest, obviously with a lot of experience under your belt? How are you working with some of these younger players to allow them to feel more comfortable in their roles?
I mean, giving them space, because I think they have like developed their own way of playing the game, being a bit younger. Maybe from, for example, he's been playing a lot of pugs and stuff like that. If he has a few plays that he wants to do every now and then, I'll let him do it, because most of the times it works out great for him. And C.R.A.E is super aggressive. He just wants to push all the time. It's basically I have to hold the rope to not let him just run away too far. But most of the time as well, like I think we're actually taking pauses in practice games, explaining to them like, okay, like we lost this round because of this and this. So making sure that everyone is on the same page and understands like why something actually happened, why a call was made, or like basically explaining, for example, how we could have had a crossfire or flash for each other or whatever. So we're like trying to all the time help them out and explain to them how we can do things better, so that next time it happens, we're all on the same page.
That's interesting. Obviously, you mentioned about the practice games there and the input that you're giving them. So how does that work in an official, when maybe something isn't going too well? How are you guys, maybe using Vendetta as well within that to sort of help the team out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I will, in an official game, tell people, oh, like, yeah, you shouldn't do that or you shouldn't do this. It's more like, we're taking a pause probably and just talk through what's happening, what are the enemy team doing, how can we, like, counter that, or what's the best call to make. So it's basically input from everyone. It's super hard for me to just be everywhere on the map and know exactly what everyone on the map is doing. So taking pauses, talking to each other all the time, like making sure the players on the sides are updating info, like what the enemies are doing. Maybe they are weak for a fast take somewhere or something like that. So I think it's more, updating information, making sure that everyone is on the same point. I will not sit and flame them during an official game for sure.
And of course, your next matchup is going to be against none other than Fnatic, which is, of course, a very tall task looking at their form recently. But looking at some of your performances against them this year, of course, with a slightly different lineup, you guys made a lot of these matches really, really close, some of them going to multiple OTs. So how is your approach kind of different coming into today to make sure you're taking the win?
I think playing against Fnatic is always going to be one of those like derbies, even though we don't have the same lineup as we had previously this year, and even before when we played in an IP. I still feel like some sort of rivalry between me and Fnatic. I guess Forest probably feels the same. So it's just a fun game. Like it just brings that extra fuel to the fire, I think, playing against them. Obviously, I think they are the favorites coming into this map. They have been playing well recently, and we are sort of a new team. But yet again, I still feel confident. I feel like we don't have any pressure. No one expects us to win, so we could just play our game, and hopefully we can bring our A game and win.
Well, just quickly, Rubberback, if you could say one thing to Fnatic ahead of this matchup, what would it be?
Good question. Overestimate us and see what will happen.
Well, thank you so much, Rubberback, for taking the time to chat with me. We're going to be heading to a quick break, but when we are back, it's Dignitas Vi taking on Fnatic.